Hello everyone, and welcome to the second in our series of our NDIS webinars. Today we're here to talk about how to get the most out of your NDIS plan. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and our two panelists. So my name is Nicole Gamarov and I'm the founder of MyCareSpace. We're an online community that creates meaningful connections for people living with a disability so that they can build extraordinary lives. Thank you to everyone who's dialed in and everyone who's sent in questions. We were overwhelmed with the number of questions and it would be impossible to answer all your questions. Let me just state that up front. However, we will be producing a document and a resource on our website for useful links, and that will be in our website, which is www.mycarespace.com.au. So our two panelists, we're very fortunate today to have two individuals who are extremely knowledgeable and skilled in their particular area of expertise. We have Sean Dempsey, who's the CEO of Plan Management Partners. And Plan Management Partners are a leading expert and provider of plan management and support coordination services for NDIS participants. Sean is driven by his desire to help people realize their potential, and he supports his team in helping people bring their NDIS plans to life. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you.
We also have Charmaine, who is a support coordinator and a peer mentor for NDIS participants. Charmaine is also a trainer for professionals and parents in the field of autism. And Charmaine also happens to be a mother of two teenage children, the eldest one of which is on the autism spectrum. So here are two random facts or quirky facts about Sean and Charmaine respectively. So Sean, as a child, grew up in Queensland and was bitten by a snake and ended up spending a night in hospital. I've just asked him if he knew what the snake was, but sadly they never found out. Charmaine, on the other hand, really loves putting together IKEA furniture. Go figure, we're in good hands. So, in terms of a couple of things that we really want to emphasize today, and there are probably three things one needs to understand about getting the most out of your NDIS plan through either plan management or through self-management. The first thing to understand is that if you're agency managed, you need to use NDIS registered providers, and you need to comply with the NDIS price guide. If you plan managed, you have the choice of using non-NDIS registered service providers, and you do need to stick within the NDIS price guide. On the other hand, if you're self-managing, you don't need to only use NDIS registered providers, and you don't need to stick with the NDIS price guide. So really, in a nutshell, that will give you the high-level differences between the three. So based on the questions that we've received from everyone, there are really three main sections to our webinar. The first is about getting ready for your NDIS plan, and that's because about 70% of our webinar participants don't have NDIS plans yet. So that was really important. The second is understanding the difference between plan management and self-management. And the third section to our webinar will be the ongoing success of your funding. So the first part is getting ready for your NDIS plan. So let's start with Charmaine. So how do people actually start preparing for their planning and getting access to the NDIS?
So I guess the first point is raising an access request, and eligibility for the NDIS comes down to three key points. They are age. The individual needs to be aged between 0 and 65 at the time they enter the scheme. Residency, they need to either be an Australian resident or permanent resident. And the other is disability. And that's probably the most important criteria and the one that I'll drill down on a little bit more. So the evidence of disability, eligibility under the disability, can be demonstrated in two ways. You can either, on the access request form, have your treating specialist complete section F, and when you get your access request form, you'll see what that section requires, or you can submit existing reports and assessments. And my understanding is that they need to be not less than 2 years old. So they need to be recent and updated. There's a number of conditions, disabilities, that the NDIA recognise as meeting the criteria. And so people who have a diagnosis get automatic access into the scheme. And they can include things like moderate, severe or profound intellectual disability, autism, level 2 or 3, cerebral palsy that has a severity of 3, 4 or 5 on the GMFCS, and a range of other genetic conditions, spinal cord injuries, acquired brain injuries, blindness, deaf blindness, and amputation. Now, I'll give you the link to those conditions because it's really important to understand, are you on the VIP access, or do you need to prove our functional capacity? And really, so which of these routes do you prove eligibility? Because if you're not on that list of conditions that are already determined to meet eligibility, then you need to circle back and prove that you have a severe and permanent disability and that you meet it across different functional domains that include mobility, communication, social interaction, learning, self-care and self-management. So one of the things that I noticed about the people who are participating in this webinar, there's a high number of people who have, they're either on the autism spectrum or have loved ones that are on the autism spectrum. So let me just confirm that the automatic access is granted to those with autism level 2 or 3, and that's in accordance with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition. That's the latest diagnostic criteria for autism. And so that leaves us asking, what about autism level 1? And in that case, you really do need to go back, understand the access criteria, and be able to speak to the level of the autism and the functional capacity. I hope that helps, and I'll send some links through so that people can really use good reputable links to the NDIS resources so they can understand that. Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is we'll follow this webinar up with a transcript and useful links. So now that people have an idea of how do they become eligible, how do they access the scheme, the next challenge is writing goals. And we know that there's NDIS speak that you need to use, reasonable and necessary. So Sean, tell us a little bit about, once someone is eligible, how do they go about writing their goals, and how can plan managers like plan management partners assist people with this?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So the first thing I'd say is the journey from assessing eligibility and becoming eligible to preparing for a planning meeting, to having the planning meeting, to receiving the plan and then bringing the plan to life is a journey. And each one of the points in time that I just spoke about there requires an enormous amount of preparation. The better prepared a person or a participant or their family is for those important milestones, the better outcome the person will receive. In terms of NDIS speak, I think the best advice I could give is understand a few terminologies like reasonable and necessary and choice and control and support and guidance and navigation, but don't fall into the trap of trying to understand every piece of terminology or every word that the NDIA will use. Use language that you're comfortable with, use language that you use in everyday life. In terms of preparing for the discussion, there's really three things to focus on. What do I need in life? What kind of supports do I need every day to be comfortable and to be able to feel good in myself? That's the first thing. So what do I need in life? The second is, what do I want out of life? What are my goals? What do I want to achieve? Do I want to join a sports club? Do I want to enter the workforce? Do I need training in a certain part of any profession to re-enter the workforce? Do I just want to make more friends in society? Do I want to go to the club once a week? So understand what I now want in life. And the third then is, who do I want to help me? So what supports do I need to achieve my wants and my needs? And the goal should come out of answering those questions. But again, the advice would be prepare, don't overcomplicate, but be very assertive in terms of what your goals and your needs and your wants are. This is not a time to be a shrinking violet and to sit back and hope everything will go well. Prepare, be assertive, be very directive as to what you want to get out of your NDIS plan.
And plan managers can help you pen those goals and put some substance to them?
Yes, we'd like to think that our role as a plan manager is to take what can be a quite I don't know, benign 15-page document and bring it to life. And the way that we do that is help people think about the questions that they're going to be asked by the planner or by the NDIA. And we can help our customers, or any participants for that matter, with answering those questions through pre-planning documents, through different fact sheets, through telephone calls or face-to-face conversations with our people. It's quite a significant amount of work that we do in helping customers prepare best for that first discussion they're going to have. We've got a number of very helpful documents, I think, Nicole, that we'll share through links through MyCareSpace.
And I think we should be clear, just to indicate to people, and we will emphasise this later, that plan management, anyone can apply for plan management in their plan and in their goals. It doesn't detract from any of the other services and therapies that you may be funded for under the NDIS. So it's important to realise that the plan manager is really there to help you. It's over and above, and they focus on the administration of your plan. So not necessarily finding you service providers, but they are focused on the administration. So in practice, Charmaine, I know that you are, your son is an NDIS participant, you're a support coordinator, but tell us in real life, what does reasonable and necessary mean? How does that play out for a person that's seeing this for the first time?
Well, these are three big words in the NDIS. It's not just reasonable or necessary, it's reasonable and necessary. So the best thing that I can give you is a link to the NDIS page that discusses reasonable and necessary, and also actually Sean's plan management partners did an excellent blog post on reasonable and necessary. So read those, because they're really going to help you to understand it. But if I've got a few minutes, I'm going to just kind of cover what that means, why those words are so important. So the first thing is that reasonable and necessary supports should really do four things. They should help you to pursue your goals, and Sean mentioned about formulating goals, increase your independence, increase social and economic participation, and develop your capacity to take part in the community. And they're really broad, overarching kind of objectives of the scheme. And so that's why reasonable and necessary supports need to fall into that. Sounds easy, but wait, because there's more. Reasonable and necessary supports need to be related to your disability, not include day-to-day living costs, that's a big one, represent value for money, be likely to be effective and beneficial, and they take into account informal supports, community supports, and mainstream supports. There's a few things that are definitely out when it comes to reasonable and necessary supports. It's not related to your disability. Nope. If it duplicates other supports funded somewhere else in the NDIS, if it relates to those day-to-day living costs, or if it's likely to cause harm. So it's a lot, and I don't expect people to remember it, but you can link back to it and almost do your own kind of test. But I thought I'd test a couple of items. So there's lots of, I think, parents that have registered. So one of the most commonly requested items is therapies. And they fall into the broader support purpose called capacity building. So yes, therapies are generally considered reasonable and necessary, but you'll need to look at evidence-based. So the NDIS will fund things that are proven to be beneficial, that have an evidence base, and expect the agency to be looking for recommendations. So if you've got a speech therapist or an OT or a behaviour therapist or a psychologist, they'll be looking for their recommendations for how many hours that might be reasonable to fund. So let's switch support purpose and have a look at a core support, and that might be daily activities or social and community participation. Yeah, definitely. This is an area that the NDIS fund. But in this case, the NDIS is going to start looking at what would be reasonable for an informal support to provide. So while it might be, the NDIS might really expect that parents of an infant or a young child would be contributing to all of their personal care. As that individual gets older, the NDIS would start to consider funded supports, so personal care and social and community participation for an adult with a disability.
So, for example, if you've got a child, the parents are expected to do the bathing and feeding of that child no matter what?
Well, there's a reasonable expectation. I think what we have to understand here is that disability is incredibly broad, and some people have disabilities with very high physical support needs where that might be a two-person job. So then would the NDIS fund one person or two people? So there's never an answer that says the NDIS fund this or they don't fund that. It's always personal circumstances. And then it always tracks back to your goals and aspirations. So there's never a simple answer to reasonable and necessary. But I've got one more to throw at you, which comes from the support purpose of capital. And very commonly people say, what assistive technology might the NDIS fund? Well, they'll fund assistive technology that increases independence or reduces person-to-person supports. So some of the things that I see a lot of funded is mobility aids, communication aids, hearing and vision aids. So, that's kind of very easy to be reasonable and necessary. But I've seen knockbacks on other things. Most classic one that we saw a few years ago, a lot of requests for things like, I don't know if I can use the word Thermomix, or let's just say multi-purpose cooking implement. That's highly desirable for many 45-year-old women who were in my peer group. But look, the NDIS didn't fund those. And the reason why, my understanding of the reason why they didn't was because it didn't represent value for money. It felt that the combined tasks that it achieved could be purchased more cheaply somewhere else. But also there was that blow with safety. So I'm not sure 100% where the reasonable and necessary failed on that, but there would have been 2 points there. Great. The other things that I've seen knockbacks are things like pool hoists, where they don't reduce person-to-person supports, or vehicle modifications in older cars, and iPads. They've really become that kind of everyday item that the NDIS is saying we don't fund that. Again, this is not me making that decision. This is me kind of interpreting the legislation. So I hope that helps people follow the links, read the blog, and understand those words reasonable and necessary.
So guys, hopefully that's got everyone onto the sort of idea of the amount of preparation that you should do in preparing for your first plan meeting and getting your first plan ready. So it's prepare. But really, let's get into the meaty part of the webinar today, which is really understanding the key differences between the different funding options under the NDIS. So everyone has choice and control in terms of how they manage their NDIS plan. And there are 4 different ways. The one is agency managed, the second is plan managed, the third option is self-managed, and then the fourth option is a combination. So we'd like to try and tease out the main differences between self-managing and plan managing, because we do believe that that's how you're going to get the most out of your NDIS funds. That's how you're going to stretch your funds, and that's how you're going to get the most flexibility. But we think it's important that people understand the difference between all 4 options. So, Charmaine, we'll kick off with you.
Mm-hmm.
So very briefly.
I'm trying to be brief.
Self-managed and agency managed. So if you could tell us in 2 minutes.
Yeah, what's the highlight? What's the highlight of self-managing? Well, for me, the highlight of self-management is sitting in my dressing gown, processing invoices while kind of muttering to myself that it's all down to me. So I fell into self-management because back in 2014, when my son joined the scheme, the service provider that we were using hadn't registered yet. We were in Newcastle and they were in Sydney, and the NDIS was 3 years away, and they were blissfully oblivious to what was coming. So by being self-managed, I was able to access that provider, even though they weren't registered. So really, I became a self-manager by default, not design. But now I really love being a self-manager because I get choice and control over who I can engage. I can use registered or non-registered providers. And actually, I know we're going to provide a link to a great blog that Plan Management Partners did about what does it mean to be non-registered. That doesn't mean dodgy, it just means not registered. As I said, the very reputable provider that we had in Sydney wasn't registered yet. But for me, it means that we can use a real mix of providers. We use some big providers, some small providers, independent contractors, and then some of the newer innovators like Higher Up and Better Caring, and I'll talk a bit more about them later, because this is really about processes.
Yeah.
So in every case, the provider that we use issues us with a tax invoice. It details the hours of support that they provided and the price. I check it, and then in my dressing gown, get onto the NDIS portal, process that invoice. Within about 48 hours, the funds arrive in my account. And it's a dedicated bank account, a little designator. I've got my own debit card. And then once those funds are received, then I pay the invoices. Even when we see a psychologist who likes to be paid on the day, I can either claim it back the same day and be reimbursed, or I can even potentially get a quote from them, claim on the quote, and have the money in my account. So I don't need to be out of pocket to be a self-manager. And I could even use the savings that I make as a self-manager to bring in some of those supports. I could outsource the administration that I do, but it would come out of my budget. And I'm going to give you a link to capacity building supports in self-management. There's a good fact sheet to explain what you can and can't claim additionally as a self-manager. I keep all the invoices and files on my computer. I label them with the provider and the date, so that if I ever had to pull up an invoice and justify a claim, I'm ready.
Yeah.
And that's part of the job of being a self-manager, is being organised and being ready and keeping good records. The only restrictions really to using my funds are that it has to be reasonable and necessary supports, and then I have to avoid falling into something like fraud or misuse of funds. And again, I can help you out to understand what that means by giving you a fact sheet that the NDIS produced about what they call payment integrity. So, look, my simple tip is know the rules, play by the rules, and you'll be fine.
Great. So I think the key there is, if you're the type of person that wants maximum control, that wants maximum flexibility, and you have the capacity to do the administration, then self-managing is for you. But what if you want all of those benefits, but you don't have the time, or you don't have the inclination, or you just cannot pay invoices? Then you can have all the benefits, but plan managers like Sean will take that headache away from you. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about the plan management option and what the benefits are over and above some of the other options.
Yeah, that's great. The first thing, Nicole, I think, just to reinforce something you said a couple of minutes ago, and that is plan management comes under what's called choice and control. If you want your plan to be managed by an intermediary like Plan Management Partners, that is your choice, and no one can take that away from you. It's one of the biggest pieces of misinformation that is currently within the sector. It doesn't take funds away from other support areas. It's fully funded, it's quarantined funding, and it's separate, and it's your choice. And my best advice is, do not let anyone tell you otherwise. The benefits of plan management are that you get almost all of the flexibility of self-management, but someone else takes care of the invoicing, the administration, keeping a track of spending, managing service providers, managing their invoicing, managing issues that they might have, ensuring that we're complying with all of the rules and the regulations that the NDIA put in place. We'll help people source service providers. So Charmaine mentioned Higher Up and Better Caring are two fantastic, innovative service providers that are new to the disability sector. So we've got, I think, I'm close to guessing here, but somewhere around 1,500 service providers that we deal with day in, day out. And we will help people find those service providers and put them in contact with those service providers. We will then make sure service agreements are in place. We'll make sure they understand how the NDIA works. We'll receive their invoices and we'll pay their invoices, take care of all of the other stuff that Charmaine likes to do in between dismantling and rebuilding IKEA equipment in her nightgown.
Good remembering.
So look, it's all of the benefits of self-managing without any of the paperwork and any of the headache that would come with someone who hasn't got the time or the inclination, or, to be fair, the background and the experience in the training that's required to manage quite complex financial transactions.
So would it be fair to say that in some ways you simplify dealing with a government agency, you take that headache away, people don't necessarily have to deal with the NDIA portal, and in terms of setting up relationships with service providers, you do all of that on people's behalf?
Yes, we do. What I would say is, if a participant had no inclination whatsoever to deal with the NDIA ever, then deal with a plan manager, and we'll do that. So we can handle the portal, we can handle inquiries and track budgets, and we'd like to think that our customers then have the time and participants have the time to focus on them and their lives and not worry about all of the other stuff that becomes a problem from time to time.
So, and with plan management, Sean, I mean, a lot of people were asking about flexibility of funding. So how much flexibility do people have when they're using a plan manager? We know that you have maximum flexibility when you're self-managing, but do you have to comply with the NDIS price guide if you're using a plan manager? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, again, this is one of the grey areas, and it's changed over the last 12 months or so. We have flexibility to use any providers, whether they've decided to register with the NDIA or not. So using a plan manager allows you to access all of the same providers that you would be able to access if you were self-managed. However, in the last 12 months, there's been a change that now requires us to ensure that providers, registered or unregistered, meet the price guide that the NDIA sets. Now, we'd prefer that to not be the case. We'd prefer for our customers to have the same flexibility of self-managing as in plan managing, but no, we're required to meet the price guide. Now, that creates some issues from time to time. We try to ensure we establish very firm expectations up front. I was speaking to an OT in Toowoomba on Friday for a customer who has been going to see this OT for a number of years. Typically, they charge above the price guide. It was about a 15-minute discussion. We came to an agreement where they would meet the $175.57 requirement of improved daily living. So it's something that we do on behalf of our participants, manoeuvre our way through some of those complexities.
So in a way, you smooth the edges for people and take away some of those headaches.
We'd like to think so.
Great. So, okay, so let's say I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, fantastic, plan management is for me. I couldn't bear to worry about invoices or Excel spreadsheets. So, Sean, you're the guy. How do I go about finding and choosing a good plan manager?
Yeah. There's plenty of resources available online, and there's plenty of discussions online as well. But I would say do your research, and trust is the biggest factor. Find someone that you can trust in a partnership with you. Trust that they'll take care of your service providers, that they'll pay them quickly, that they'll track your spending, and that they'll talk to you when you need someone to receive advice from. So have a conversation with someone on the telephone. We've had people who we've spent hours on the telephone and in pre-planning discussions before they become a customer of ours. We've had customers who are desperate for a plan manager because they've received their plan. They need to access funding straight away through an unregistered providers. It's a 5-minute conversation and they sign and we're off and running. But talk to someone, find someone you can trust, find someone that you can rely on is the advice that I'd give. There are plenty of resources online. We'd love you to come to Plan Management Partners if you chose a plan manager, but there are other very good plan managers out there.
Great, thanks. And of course, there's always MyCareSpace. So we have a national directory, and we have many plan managers. We have, and we certainly we encourage people to provide reviews so that if you don't have access to a network, you can still see what other people are saying about plan managers. So I think we had a discussion about this before, and one of the key things in terms of your success in the NDIS and getting the most out of the plan is to talk and connect with as many people as possible. So speak to other parents, speak to other peers who have lived experience, and do your research. So, and the same applies when you're choosing a plan manager. So Charmaine, a lot of questions we received were about engaging service providers. So if you're self-managing, I think one of the concerns or fears about self-managing is that you may have to employ care workers, support workers. Can you talk a little bit about what the options are?
I think sometimes people get a bit confused and they think that if you're self-managed, you'll always be directly engaging supports. But actually, I engage supports in a range of different ways. So I thought I'd talk about the different options and hopefully clarify it a bit for people. So the first way as a self-manager that you can engage supports is you can just go to a disability service provider, disability and support provider. And they could be registered or unregistered. They might have been around for years. They might be new to the game. And usually that provider would source their own staff, employ them directly, perform background checks, maybe train them, schedule their staff, pay them in accordance with the award, have insurances in place. And good ones would have like an on-call team that if somebody cancelled at the last minute, they might even be able to source a replacement.
Right.
Yeah. So that's your kind of full service. And for that, you pay the full NDIS price guide rate. So if we used a comparison of a daytime support for personal care, that'd be $44.72 on a weekday. So that's your kind of all-in rate. But people who are looking to either be innovative or stretch their budget a bit further might look for other options. So you could look among the ranks of independent contractors. Now, independent contractors have set up their own little business. So they would have an ABN. They could still be a registered NDIS provider or unregistered, but it's just the nature of their businesses. Right. They've set themselves up as a contractor. And a contractor is responsible for their own insurances, their own superannuation. And, you just think about that. They're unlikely to have a backup for cancellations because they're more likely to just be their own show.
Sole trader.
So what would you expect for the cost of an independent contractor? Well, it's hard to say because they really are allowed to operate outside of awards, but suggest a starting rate of about $25 an hour. And you can imagine the differential between that means that you really can stretch your funding a bit further. So we've got disability service providers, we've got independent contractors, and then we've got that option where you might actually directly employ somebody. So that means you're the employer and you need to learn about a few important things. Australian employment law is complex, but you need to understand about paying somebody the award wage, how to withhold tax from their salary, insurances, compulsory superannuation. There's quite a number of things. And again, the NDIS have prepared a fact sheet. You can find out about this. It's not outside the reach of people, and some may already have expertise in this area. You might be running your own small business.
Exactly.
And this is for you. Same. Look, as a guide, the SHADS award is about $27 an hour. If you add in super, you're all in at about $30 an hour. So again, an opportunity to really stretch that budget further than if you were using somebody who's charging the price guide. And then, one of the things that I mentioned and that Sean mentioned were innovators in the market. And again, these could be registered or unregistered, and they have different ways of acting as a platform to engage with support workers. Good example is Hire Up, where they actually take on the employment responsibility. So they employ people, pay them award wage, pay their superannuation, and kind of then kind of give them this platform to advertise their availability, and you can book them, and the money kind of exchanges all online.
So you still get to choose who your support worker is.
Very much.
You just don't have to employ them. Hire Up actually employs them.
And probably even more so. When you think about, if you go back to the traditional disability service provider, they tended to fill shifts. Your Friday lunchtime, I can get you somebody at Friday lunchtime. But something like Hire Up, you start to match on personalities and interests, and you can start to use different ways to find a support that suits you. So I personally use Hire Up. Better Caring is not registered, and their platform helps you to engage with independent contractors. So they're different, they're similar but different, and worth checking out what would suit you the best. And pricing methods vary. But there's other innovative platforms, things like Home Care Heroes and Care Seekers. There's many of them. But the thing that they have in common is that they are below the NDIS price guide, so you can stretch your funding further.
Great, and I think that's the key is that there are options and there's something for everyone. So if you're happy to use a non-registered provider, then Care Seekers, for example, gives you that option. But if you prefer to stick with an NDIS provider, Hire Up. So the important thing is to know about these platforms, to know about these innovative providers. So that's great. Thanks, Charmaine. The other question that was asked repeatedly from people who registered for this webinar is, what is the difference between support coordination? Who gets support coordination? And does it have to be agency managed? So, Sean, I don't know if you want to comment on that, given that you, Plan Management Partners does do support coordination, and maybe a little bit of comparison between that and plan management.
Yeah, no, good. Thank you. Support coordination is very much work with the participant or with their family, trying to establish what supports might be reasonable, what supports could be accessed given the funding that's available. So it's very much shoulder to shoulder, over the telephone, deep conversations about my goals, what I want to achieve in life, and what my needs are. Plan management, on the other hand, is more of the financial administration. And if I can really break it down, plan management is invoicing, payments, and keeping a track of budgets. Support coordination is working side by side, shoulder to shoulder, to try to get the most out of my plan, if you like, connecting with service providers that might provide alternative opportunities for my supports. So that's a very, very quick quick definition of the two. Support coordination is subject to a reasonable and necessary test. So not everyone who asks for support coordination necessarily gets it. Our view is support coordination is, number one, undervalued by, I think, if I can be critical, by the agency. I think it is of enormous benefit to participants, and we've seen just extraordinary outcomes for people because they've been connected to a good support coordinator with a good plan manager attached at the back end. So I think it's undervalued, but it's also then underutilised. We see for customers who've got support coordination in their plans, it's horribly underutilised. So it's an enormous opportunity to get support coordination in your plan and to then utilise it as much as you possibly can.
Right, great. And in terms of whether that part of the plan needs to be agency managed, is that a good assumption?
No, it does not. So we've got quite a number of customers who have their support coordination managed by the agency, managed by a plan manager, or self-managed. Not a lot self-managed, but we've got quite a number of customers who have support coordination either managed by us as the plan manager or another plan manager because they've chosen to separate the two. So no, because you've got support coordination, it does not change any of your plan management options whatsoever.
Good. And Charmaine, did you want to jump in there, or do you agree?
My understanding of the terms of business is that support coordinators have to be registered.
Yes.
Registered, right. Yeah.
So if you can still work that around the way the funds are managed, then sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I guess it's important that people understand this. So support coordination, you can ask for it, but it's not guaranteed. Plan management, everyone is entitled to plan management. So Sean, the third part of our webinar is around how can we provide for ongoing success of managing our funds. And again, one of the key areas here that people asked for support was around how do we find suitable service providers and suitable therapists and people who will help bring our plan to life. And of course there's MyCareSpace and we'd love people to come on and see how we can support them. But as a plan manager, what would your response be to people asking this question?
Yeah, we'll ask people what they're trying to achieve out of connecting with a certain support provider. We'll ask them whether it's important that they're close to home, that they focus on my specific need as a participant, whether I'm a child or an adolescent or an adult, what my goals are, if it's physical therapy or other types of therapy. We'll then provide people with choices. We're an independent plan manager, which means we don't provide any service provision at all, nor do we make or receive any payments for referring customers to certain service providers. So we're entirely independent. For that reason, we'll provide a number of options to our customers to make contact with the service provider and have a conversation. And that's the only way that a participant or their carer or their family can make that connection with a provider that they can then trust for their ongoing support. So we'll provide a number of options for people. We'll help them make connections with the service providers, but then we will say that you need to make the decision for yourself.
Good. And that's where choice and control comes in.
Choice and control comes in. Now, I think I said earlier, we've got somewhere around 1,500 service providers that we deal with quite regularly, and that will be everywhere from Townsville to Melbourne to Adelaide in every rollout or every region that's rolled out to date. So we're well connected. There are some just outstanding service providers in the sector. Charmaine mentioned some before. Just remarkable opportunities for people. If you're not necessarily happy with who you're connected to, call someone like Plan Management Partners. Look at MyCareSpace and other avenues to understand what else is out there. There are remarkable providers in the sector.
We would agree, and I think the most important thing is for people to get connected and ask other people, speak to other parents, jump online. There's lots of online resources, and you mentioned you have 1,500 service providers that you have relationships with. We have over 8,000 providers listed on MyCareSpace. The issue with that is that people are overwhelmed, but ask for help. There are avenues, and certainly in terms of innovative providers, there's lots and lots of them. So thanks for that, Sean. So in this section of our webinar around ongoing success, one of the key things, again, that people struggle with is what happens at the end of my funding period if there's funds left over? Can I carry it over to the next period? What do I do? So, Charmaine, in your experience, how would you, what advice would you give people?
Well, I've got a very simple adage. There's two things I don't understand: unspent funds in your NDIS plan and leftover wine. So my advice to you is use your plan. Look, and you're exactly right. The funds do not carry over. This is a one-year plan. You are funded for that term. And when that time runs out, those funds don't carry over. Now, that is deeply shocking for people. But really, if you don't use it, you lose it. So make a plan. And that's whether you do it yourself with a spreadsheet, and I am among other, I'm sure there's lots of self-managers like me who have a spreadsheet, have it month by month, and, you know, if I can have a second highlight of self-management, it's bringing my funds planning on budget, on time and on budget. You know, that's kind of something that I take great time to plan for and pride in doing. But there's a lot of reasons why people might not be able to utilise their budget. So it's not as simple as saying you should spend it, because there's a number of reasons why the capacity of the market might not be there to need the funds. Just because everybody's suddenly got funding for therapies doesn't mean that there's a ready supply of those for the uptake. So look, you know, I think, and really the closer you are to a capital city, the more chance you've got for choice, and the further you go from that, there's some real issues in building the market to capacity. So yeah, the issues with staff, finding suitable staff, finding suitably trained staff who are available when you want, and that can make utilising your plan a real challenge. But make no mistake, utilisation is the best justification you've got for continuing to give you plan.
The NDIA wants you to spend this money. This is not, you know, an organisation that is trying to cut costs. Every discussion I've had with senior people in the agency is accessibility to funds, and utilisation of funds is one of their key performance indicators internally. They want you to spend this money. It will allow people to contribute to a better society if they're accessing all of the supports that are available. So I just reinforce what Charmaine said. The money's there, use the money.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say in some, especially rural and regional areas, people don't have access to service providers. So our experience at MyCareSpace is have a look around and find out what innovative ways of engaging with providers. So there are a number of providers who are using Skype, who are using web conferencing, whether they're music therapists or counsellors. There are options out there, and I think people just need to know about them and find out about them.
Well, that really comes back to, you know, unlocking potential through other plan management or self-management, because the answer to your support needs might not be in a brick building with a yellow sign on it that's traditional disability supports. One of the best supports that I found was a neighbour close by, had an adult son with a disability, had an ABN registered from a business, who was across the road and there when I needed her. So, you know, think outside the box, be innovative in your own life about where supports could be. And then maybe, you know, then there's a dual benefit. It means that you get the supports that you need. And as Sean pointed out, you know, people are employed by the funds that are in the NDIS plan that you've got. And make no mistake, this is an insurance scheme, the government initiative. You know, the idea that you spend your plan means that you employ people, and then they spend money and they pay GST and they pay Medicare levy, and the economic wheels turn. So, you know, that's kind of more of a heartless economic way of looking at it. But really, when you spend your plan, you create the viability of the next plan.
I mean, the bottom line is there's no benefit to not spending your funding. So there's no benefit to leaving some over for the next period. So the idea is you may need to become innovative, you may need to engage directly with providers, but hopefully Sean and Charmaine have given you the confidence to know that there are different avenues of doing this. Yes, you may need to find out what the tax implications are, or you may need to find out what the insurance implications are. But it's doable. You just need to know where to find the information. We will be publishing useful links. So a lot of the references that Charmaine and Plan Management Partners resources will be published on MyCareSpace. So look out for that. So in terms of Charmaine, coming back to you as a mother. In terms of innovative ways of engaging with providers, you've spoken about that, using your neighbour. And is there anything else? So if you had to wrap it up and really give your opinion on whether self-managing is worth the effort?
Look, it's worked for us. I've thought to myself, in years to come, will I still be a self-manager? If I wasn't here, would my husband step up and self-manage? Yeah. And the answer is probably not. You know, I really am the designated self-manager. I'm the designated internet banker. So I think sometimes with self-management, it's the right time to do it. So it really suited us at the time because it unlocked the providers that we wanted to use. And I had some insight, actually. I probably didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I saw something like this and another mum said that she was a self-manager and I thought, if she could do it, I can do it. I mean, really, it's not that I had some kind of deep kind of realisation that I wanted to be a self-manager. I just thought, if she can do it, I can do it, and it has worked out well. But there could be a stage where if I got older, I might actually change and move to plan management. I've also seen people that have gone the other way, that have used plan management as a stepping stone to then realising that they could be self-managed. So I think the other thing that we can say is you don't have to lock into an identity. You know, for those people who out there who have agency managed plans, that's not the end of it. That's actually great. You've still got choice and control. You've still got self-direction. Don't feel bad about that. It's the default.
Sure. No,
it's the default for NDIS plans, and most people are that. But if this just awakens just a little kind of thought that I'd like to be more innovative, or I wish I had more choices, or if I was plan managed, I could engage with that person, well, then that's, I guess, the objective of talking about this, so that you don't have to choose. You don't have to choose team self-management or team plan management. We're not against each other. We're actually kind of complementary alternatives to agency managed.
And I think the way that Charmaine has sort of described it, and Sean, I don't know how you feel about this, but certainly for people who want more flexibility, perhaps a good option is start with plan management. So the first thing is to ask for it. Act as the plan manager, and that will unlock some of the potential. So, Sean, would you say that that's potentially not a bad journey for some people to take on plan management to start off and then move on to self-management?
If that's what the person has as one of their goals, then absolutely. One of our proudest moments in this business was a young man, I think it was early 20s, who'd said to us all along, I want to get to a position where you can teach me how to self-manage. So we provided the tools, we provided the information, all of the service agreement templates that we had. And at the end of the first 12 months, as hard as it was to say goodbye to a customer, this young fellow is now self-managing his plan. And an incredibly proud moment for the small part that we played in this. And I think you're losing your.
Also, this is a sign that the webinar.
The moustache is falling off.
Sorry, my wig's about to fall off. It's a sign that we need to wrap up this webinar. But thank you. I think that must be an incredibly proud moment for plan management partners to know that you've built someone's capacity to the level where, in fact, they can do it themselves.
One of a countless number of proud moments that we've had in a short couple of years, Nicole.
Wonderful. Well, that's wonderful. So on that note, we did get a lot of questions from people about plan reviews and appeals, and due to the complexity and the amount of information that we can share around plan reviews, that would really involve a separate webinar. So we are working on material, by the way, Charmaine, and if you're interested, Sean, on the next webinar. But certainly we will provide some information on where to go if you need a plan review. But in terms of wrapping things up today, I'd love to just thank Sean and Charmaine for taking time out to share your insights. And hopefully, if we've moved a couple of people and built up their confidence to consider plan management and self-management, then this has been a success. Of course, we will provide useful links on mycarespace.com.au. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.